Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Gianna Malucci. I am so glad that you decided to join me today. In today's video, we're going to be talking about none other than Chiron through the houses. Chiron is a planetoid that represents the archetype of the wounded healer. It is our deepest wounds and traumas, as well as our deepest capacity to heal. And it's really prominent in my chart personally, so I like talking about it. And I feel like this video has been a long time coming, so I'm excited to share it with you. If you're new to my channel, you are so welcome here. There's only one rule, and that is if you are super hot and you love astrology, you do have to like this video and subscribe below. Yeah, so please do that, and we'll continue. But yeah, it's a really great channel. I post astrological content, including celebrity birth chart readings and other astrological information so that you can know yourself more fully, and in knowing yourself more fully, you can love yourself and shake off what isn't you. Alrighty, all that being said, let's hop into the video. So as I was saying about Chiron, just a general overview of it, Chiron is the archetype of the wounded healer. Chiron also has to do with our biggest traumas that can be psychological, physical, and emotional, spiritual, etc. It's about accepting our traumas as they are and not trying to change them or eradicate the experience. Rather, we're learning through the experience so that it can be transmuted into something higher. A lot of times there's a model around healing, at least in the West, where if we have an illness, if we have an issue, the intention is to destroy it, make it no longer exist. However, Chironian healing and the energy of Chiron more so is taking whatever experience we've had and transmuting it, working with it, not trying to forget it, not trying to blotch it out of our psyche or existence. It's more so we learn to dance with it so that it's no longer driving the bus, so to speak. It doesn't control us, but we still hold space for it and take care of it. It's almost like a garden that we're tending rather than, putting a blowtorch on the garden when it becomes unruly, or maybe there's weeds in the flower bed or one of the plants overgrows. Instead, we're pulling up the weeds, we're trimming the plant. We still hold space for the garden. We don't let the garden overgrow and cross certain boundaries into areas of our life that it's not meant to be in. So I hope that makes sense. That is the energy of Chiron. It's a very holistic way of healing, and throughout the houses, Chiron represents where we're wounded as well as how we heal in those areas. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. If you'd like more information on Chiron, there's a really beautiful book by Melanie Reinhart. I believe it's called Chiron and the Healing Journey. It is a really excellent book, and I learned so much about Chiron and myself through reading it. I'll definitely put it in the description below, and I'll put like a little Amazon link to it so you can check it out. This is not sponsored by Melanie Reinhart or Amazon, but I think it's a really great book. So if you'd like to explore more about Chiron, please check that out. All right, without further ado, let's get into Chiron through the houses. All right, first up, we're going to be talking about Chiron in the first house. People who have Chiron in the first house, typically their wounds are related to initiation and starting new things. The first house is the house of beginnings. It is the start of our birth chart. It's where our rising sign is, and that's the sign that's on the eastern horizon, rising in the east as we're born. So when you have Chiron in the first house, in that house of the ascendant, it can indicate that new beginnings can cause fear or a sense of anxiety or shame in you. It's because of certain experiences regarding new beginnings. You may have had a really traumatic birth, or when you were born, there could be an indication that your parents weren't ready for a child or weren't ready for another child, or there wasn't really a welcome greeting for you in your formative experiences when you were born. It could also be a traumatic birth, or perhaps your mother had certain complications in birth. So there's a sense of like entrance and going forth, forging a new path, forging your own path can be kind of blocked or laden with certain trauma. Yeah, so when you're moving, when you're starting a new job, when you're doing these things that are new, that might be triggered in you, those experiences. So what do we do to transmute it? What do we do to like lift it up and change? As with honestly Chiron anywhere in your chart, the first step to transmuting that energy is to hold space for it and accept it. A lot of times Chironian wounds can be so deep that we deny them, and so we think we're protecting ourselves in that way. However, when we allow ourselves to hold space for those experiences, for those traumas, we learn from them and we can transmute them and kind of discern slash harvest the wisdom that comes from those things, and we can separate like what is no longer useful in those experiences and kind of let go of that psychic sludge, if you will, that can be associated with traumatic experiences. So it's that transmutation. So holding space for it. Also, being aware that when you go into new situations, there might definitely be some trauma or a lot of triggering that comes in. That being said, you have the strength and the power to blast past it and still forge your own path. Really cool thing about Chiron first house people is that they are mavericks. They are people that march to the beat of their own drum. The first house is ruled by Aries, which is very much an initiator, a go-getter. And so even when you have these experiences where you're blocked upon new beginnings, you have the strength, the courage, and the determination to push through even when it hurts, because you can hold space for those experiences, and you still are brave enough not to let them stop you, which is such a beautiful thing. And it'll get easier as you start to recognize that experience of being held back or feeling like you're held back, feeling like you're afraid to start. When you hold space for those experiences and you continue to move forward, and so as obstacles come up, you'll meet them with that wisdom, with that curiosity. That's really big, maintaining the curiosity about the situations you're in. They won't feel so traumatic, they won't feel so triggering. Instead, there'll be challenges or even blessings, sometimes blessings in disguise, but blessings that help you to become wiser in how you handle going into new situations. Chiron in the first house people might also feel like they don't have the right to exist. Again, the first house being of the body, being of existence, it can be hard for them to really fully feel safe in their bodies. First house is also our body, it's our physical appearance, our physical self. So telling yourself that you're safe in your body, allowing yourself to give your body that time to be like, hey, literally saying out loud, you are safe. I am secure in my body. I am safe in my body. You can do it. I had a mentor and a friend who's like, as you're showering and as you're washing your body, telling your body you are safe. That can be really healing for Chiron in the first house people. But yeah, holding space for those experiences, telling yourself, I deserve to exist, I do exist, I am safe existing, that can be a really healthy thing, because gradually you are replacing whatever trauma that you might have held onto unconsciously, or you might feel stuck to. You're transmuting it and you're making more space for safety and a sense of security and courage. Okay, moving on to Chiron in the second house. So for my beautiful people with Chiron in the second house, trauma and wounds oftentimes relate to personal resources and feeling like you have enough. You may have grown up in a home where there is financial instability. You might have felt like you needed constantly more, but there was never enough. It could have been not enough time for you from your parents, not enough food, not enough financial resources to really help you thrive. So you might struggle with a sense of lack in your life. And because it's the second house of personal resources, also ruled by Taurus, typically it has a more material nature. Eighth house, Scorpio energy is more of that emotional security and emotional nature. So there might be a sense of lack on that material sense. Could have created a lot of shame and fear about not having enough. With that being said, Chiron in the second house people, they experience and are able to draw in a lot of healing through acceptance of that feeling of lack, through acceptance of feeling like they don't have enough, and that shame or fear or whatever emotion surrounds that holding that in their awareness without letting it consume them. In doing so, they allow themselves to refocus, reprogram, and recalibrate their brain and their body towards what they would like to focus on. So when we feel emotions and we don't consciously engage with them to take care of them, it's almost like a loop that feeds into our subconscious, and we play that over and over again without creating any changes in our lives, because it takes the light of awareness for us to create change. So if you're feeling certain ways, those chemicals that you're releasing through your emotions into your brain and into your body, they'll continue to reperpetrate until you do something to say, wait, hold on, let me see this, let me bring this to my awareness. That way you can change. That's how we change, when we bring it into our awareness and we focus our attention elsewhere. So yeah, bringing into awareness that sense of not having enough, that sense of lack, and whatever emotion, shame, fear, etc. that you have around it, holding space for that, and then moving on towards what you do want to focus on. What does make you happy? What does make you feel abundant and prosperous? How are you connecting with that? How are you showing your personal resources, your money, your time, your energy? How are you showing them that you care about them and that you love them, you know? Creating space for your energy, for your time, for your money, and making it a ritual to accept and love and hold space for those things as well. That creates a lot of healing, and it refocuses your mind and re-chemically and neurologically aligns you to create more abundance and prosperity, because there isn't this focus or smog or sludge that keeps you in lack and keeps you focusing on lack. It sounds strange, but it is really, like, as simple as it is, it does take a lot. There's a certain amount of discipline that comes in with it, but I know you can do it. Second house is Taurus's house, which is about stick-to-itness. So as long as you're stubborn in wanting to change, it's kind of a little bit paradoxical with that. You will make that change, and you're so capable of making that change. So keeping yourself fixed on that sense of prosperity and abundance, allowing yourself to acknowledge whatever emotion or shame you feel from lack, and then focusing on gratitude, focusing on what you do have and taking care of what you do have, it allows what you do have to grow. In that way, that demon of shame or feeling lack, it isn't fed as much. We don't feed our wounds. We hold space for them, we learn from them, and then we transmute because of that. So yeah, holding space for whatever experience you've had and learning from them, seeing how they've made you stronger so you can focus on that which you need to focus on and want to focus on. That creates a lot of healing for second house people. All right, moving on to Chiron in the third house. So when you have Chiron in the third house, what it can indicate is that there's certain wounding and trauma that's related to communication. Our third house represents how we transmit and transmute information through communication. It can be written, spoken, etc. However, with Chiron in the third, there's a certain blockage or traumatic experience that limits our communication until we are able to really hold space for that trauma and transmute it. With Chiron in the third as well, there might be a tendency for some black and white thinking. Chiron in the third house is ruled by Gemini. And so Gemini is the twins. It can be also a polarity between twins. So like the twin of light and the twin of darkness, the male and the female twin, there's a sense of polarities. And so with Chiron in the third, there's like a woundedness in terms of connection between those polarities. So there may be a tendency to see things as very black and white. So how do we heal from these wounds that we experience with Chiron in the third? One of the most important things, as with all the other houses, is holding space for that trauma. With Chiron in the third, because communication is blocked, because that verbal or written expression is, there's some sort of blockage or limit that's been placed on it, it's important to recognize that limit and do what we can to speak on that limit. And that doesn't mean necessarily like trauma dumping everywhere or speaking so much about how, oh, X, Y, or Z happened and obsessing over it, but it can be about sharing our story and how it empowered us, how it strengthened us to communicate with healing. This is such a powerful placement for people that are powerful healers through speaking, that are powerful speakers, and they heal people and bring so much value through their words, through how they communicate. And oftentimes it's because they've been at ground zero when they're told that their words mean nothing. And their words do mean so much. And so with this placement, it's important for them to find ownership of their voice, because they may have had their voice taken from them or told that their voice is invaluable, is not valuable, when really it is invaluable. It's so valuable you can't put a price on it. So they heal through recognizing this trauma and being able to create their own story and voice through it. So that's, what did they learn from the experience, and how do they communicate with more grace, with more compassion, and with more of this healing energy through speaking and making it a part of their story, what their experience was, without making it their whole story, without making it the crux of who they are. A lot of times when we go through traumatic experiences, they inform who we are. They change who we are. They aren't the only thing that changes who we are, though. We have a choice in how we imbue things with meaning. So how we tell our story, how we communicate our story and our traumas to ourselves and to the world around us, that becomes the fabric of the world and the fabric of who we are. So learning to tell our stories in a way that support us, that don't make it the end of us, but make us more integrated and whole as humans, having a full human experience, even as painful as our experiences can be. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't feel and emotionally experience everything that we need to feel when processing our experiences. We can feel down, we can feel all sorts of shame, resentment, anger, whatever emotions we need to feel. That being said, it's important that when holding space for those emotions, we don't let them drive the bus and steer the narrative of our story. We are in control of our story. And so, of course, it's important to hold space for those emotions. That being said, it's important that we don't let them control our story. Moving on to Chiron in the 4th house. When you have Chiron in the 4th house, what it can indicate for you is that there's certain formative experiences that you went through growing up that felt incredibly traumatizing to your sense of foundation and sense of home. Chiron in the 4th house has to do with our roots, it's our foundations, our home, our family of origin. Chiron in the 4th house, it can indicate that there's wounding that happened in those areas and behind closed doors to us. We may have felt betrayed by certain family members, or like our sense of privacy was erupted or molested in a way. We can also feel like we never experienced a really solid sense of home, and there was always a weakness in terms of our foundations and our roots and how we were supported to kind of do the rest of our things in our chart. 4th house really supports, especially 10th house, which is opposite the 4th house. 10th house has to do with life path and career. So with that 4th house energy, it's like our roots that hold up the tree. So without a firm foundation for the roots, the tree can fall over. So feeling like home isn't a safe place, feeling like we can't rest when we're at home, and that we don't have that solid nourishment to prop us up and give us strong bones, if you will. So how do we heal when we have 4th house Chiron? Really, one of the most important things that can come from a 4th house Chiron is the ability to heal through building ourselves, our own solid sense of home. So even though foundationally we might have lacked these sense of security and safety growing up, when we are able to acknowledge those experiences, bring them into the light of our awareness, holding space for them, we can transmute them so that we learn from them, and thus we know more so what we need and what we want from our home by seeing what perhaps we didn't have, that we did need and that we did want. In doing so, it gives us the opportunity to create a new home. to create a new, more healed, more nourishing sense of security and nest where we can rest when we need to and be in privacy when we need to, and have this sense of being shielded from the outside world when we need to be shielded. When we're holding space for those experiences, it can make us feel like we are updoing our roots. We are ripping up the roots, and in a lot of ways we are. However, it's important for us to clear away things so that we can plant what we need and what we want, and have the space in our garden to do so. It's like ripping out weeds. It'll feel different and it'll feel perhaps destabilizing for a minute. It's important that we have that time and that we have that space and taking out what no longer serves us, so that even though the roots will take a minute to really burrow into the ground, once they are in there and we've done the work to make sure they have that space, it'll provide a more solid foundation, and we'll feel richer and more at peace in our hearts and in our roots as a result. Also, creating home for other people. Fourth house is our sense of home and family. So when we're able to create our own roots, we allow space for a healed home for others as well that we might bring into our homes. So those of you that have children, those of you that want children, it can be a really excellent placement when you've done the work to create a solid, stable home for your family, for the generation that you raise, and the children and family that you have in your home, whoever that family might be, chosen family that you've created, what have you. Yeah, so you deserve to have a home that you feel safe in, and through doing the work, you create that for yourself, and you're empowered to create that for yourself. All right, moving on to Chiron in the 5th house. Whoop, whoop, whoop. So when you have Chiron in the 5th, what it can indicate is that there's a sense of wounding that comes towards your creativity, sex and romance, and also it can be children too, because children are created, if you will, through romantic connection and sex. So yeah, with Chiron being in that 5th house, there may have been experiences formative for you where your creativity felt stunted, or you might have felt like the things that you produced weren't valued, weren't seen, or weren't noticed. 5th house is ruled by Leo, and Leo is all about being seen and creating and allowing what we create to be seen and noticed, and allowing ourselves to be seen and noticed, and recognizing that we're seen and noticed. So when you have Chiron in the 5th, being seen, being noticed might also be blocked. So you might not have felt like you were recognized for who you are and really appreciated for who you are. Getting back to this idea of Chiron and 5th house in terms of blocked creativity, it could come through childhood wounds where you showed art or creative projects that your parents necessarily didn't appreciate or show a sense of seeing and noticing you in that way. Or you could have even gotten in trouble for what you created. Maybe you drew on the walls. It can also be, or you made a mess in terms of what you were creating. It could also be even things as like formative as potty training could have been somewhat traumatic because there might have been shame surrounding that sense of creativity. Because that's kind of the first thing you're putting out in the world is your feces and your pee. So yeah, in a way that is something we create through our bodies. So it's about learning to hold space for our creative wounds and how we haven't been seen and noticed. Being able to say, wow, I really wasn't seen or noticed. My creativity wasn't respected or appreciated. And being able to hold space for whatever emotions come up with that. In doing so, you hold space for that and allow yourself to change so that it doesn't have to be something that's limiting you anymore, but you can learn from the experiences that you had in that and then continue forward towards the direction of your creative dreams. People with Chiron and Leo, people with Chiron in the 5th house, they heal a lot through creating, through being able to transmute whatever energies or emotions they have towards a creative project through their experiences, transmuting those experiences through creativity, allowing ourselves to draw from whatever we've been through in our creative process so that it transmutes. At first, some of these creative efforts might be almost a little bit constipated, if you will, because we're pushing them out and we're trying to allow ourselves to produce and let things out into the world. That being said, as we continue to flow, as we continue to loosen and allow ourselves to put forth what we wish into the world, what we create into the world, it allows for healing to come, not only for ourselves, but for others through what we create. It's inspirational in that we may have been wounded or told we can't create in a formative way, though we reform ourselves, we recreate ourselves. And there's so much beauty in that, and there's so much inspiration in that. And we allow other people to feel seen and noticed through our work and through seeing and noticing ourselves and allowing ourselves to be seen and noticed. All right, moving on to Chiron in the 6th house. When you have Chiron in the 6th house, what it can indicate is that your sense of routine and daily ritual, what you need to do on a daily basis to be at your baseline in health, in financial health, in emotional health, etc., there's wounding in that area. The 6th house also has to do with our health in general, so it can be wounding in relation to health and to our daily routines. Sometimes it can indicate we have habits that are very harmful to ourselves that we may have picked up in formative years or through formative experiences. Chiron in the 6th, the 6th house is ruled by Virgo too. So there may be a sense of like perfectionism in terms of what we do on a daily basis. We might feel like we can't move forward in our day unless we do certain things or have certain things like outlined and sketched out in our schedule, because we might feel a sense of chaotic energy if we don't, or chaos if we don't do what we usually do or don't follow our strict routine. 6th house is opposite the 12th house. The 12th house is ruled by Pisces, and Pisces is that oceanic kind of chaotic energy. So it's like we're trying to avoid that out of a lot of fear or trauma in the 6th house. So how do we transmute this energy? How do we come to a place of healing? Holding space for our emotions and for our experiences on a daily basis. Putting it in our routine to meditate, to create in a way that processes, to prioritize our mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being through whatever practice most resonates with us, where we can find healing. Again, 6th house is that schedule, but even scheduling time in to feel chaotic. It's that paradoxical healing that comes through, that is really Chironian, through holding space and not trying to get rid of what we feel wounded by. We heal and we transmute. So yeah, allowing yourself space in your schedule to feel chaotic, to be chaotic, and regimenting that time to be unregimented, it can be really healing, because that way you let go of some of that tightness, some of that obsessive compulsive quality that Virgo and 6th house energy can represent. You're allowing yourself to feel more free and open in terms of expressing your emotions. And when you do it on a scheduled basis, daily basis, however you decide to put it into your life and into your schedule, you become wholer and you grow more, because it takes a breaking open and a bit of chaos for newness to form, for things to grow. So with that daily routine, you can heal a lot, and you could really inspire people through that healing and through sharing how you schedule that healing or how you put in time and make it a routine to heal and do the work that you need to do to heal. That can be a really powerful thing when you have Chiron in the 6th. All right, moving on to Chiron in the 7th house. So when we have Chiron in the 7th house, what it can indicate for us is that we have wounding through partnerships and relationships. These can be romantic, they can be interpersonal, they can be business, they can even be just one-to-one kind of relationships more generally. So Chiron in the seventh, it creates sometimes either an enmeshed quality in terms of those relationships where we feel over-connected, or on the swing side, we can really separate from relationships because we fear them or feel shame around relationships. The seventh house has to do with relationships. It has to do with other people that we interact with, versus the first house, which has to do with our sense of self, our selfhood, who we are. It's like me versus the seventh house is more like us. So when we're bringing awareness to those wounds, it might bring up feelings of being enmeshed in terms of formative relationships. Sometimes Chiron in the seventh house people can feel enmeshed with their parents. They might have felt like there was sort of like a covert incestuous relationship with their parents where nothing explicitly like sexual or intimate happened, but they may have been expected to be almost like a secondary spouse to one or both parents in some cases. So there's a sense of like lack of understanding of how to connect with people in a balanced way where they're not recycling that trauma that they experienced. There's a great book, I'm gonna link it in the description. The title is escaping me right now, but I'll look it up after, that really dives into covert incest and kind of being a pseudo partner to parents. So I'll link that in the description below, but it's a really wonderful book. So how do we heal from feeling this wounding in terms of partnerships? What we can do, of course, is hold space for these traumas, allowing ourselves to experience the emotions that result from these memories, from these experiences. And in doing so, we lift them up and transmute them. We learn what we need to learn from the experiences so that we're not bogged in this like psychic sludge that results in it, and we don't feel ashamed of the experiences. However, we're able to bring them up and transmute them as a result. Also, a really wonderful thing to do is to not try to, one, force connection, but also not avoid connection. Relationships are where we learn and see so much of ourselves. So with Chiron and the seventh people, if they become so involved in relationships where they don't have the opportunity to reflect on what the relationships are teaching them about themselves, that can create more of that cyclical trauma. Or if they are, completely like, I'm never going to be in a relationship, I don't need other people, that doesn't allow them to fully experience themselves either. So learning to find balance between, seventh house is ruled by Libra, balance between those polarities, so that we still make time for ourselves, but we allow ourselves to be in relationships so that we can learn and experience more. I have a friend who says it's important that in some cases we don't fall in love with the person, but we fall in love with how they make us feel. That way we are holding space for ourselves centrally, and we're still able to connect with those other people because we want them to feel good or feel, pleasurable, beautiful, amazing as well. And so, yeah, not over attaching to a person or trying to possess a person. Instead, allow yourself to have ownership of your feelings and your emotions and your experiences. That way we're not entrapping other people, and we're also not isolating ourselves from other people. Yeah. So that's a beautiful thing. Yeah, holding space for that, and you can create a lot of healing in your relationships as a result. Another quick note about the seventh house Chiron. Sometimes people with seventh house Chirons, they may be told not to look at their wounds or not to dive deep into them, or that they don't have the potential to heal themselves. Seventh house can be things that we project onto other people because we're told that we can't hold those things ourselves. So with Chiron being the wounded healer, we may be told that we are not capable of healing ourselves. We're not capable of looking at the depth of our, experiences. And as a result, that can be really, really damaging to a person, to their selfhood, because they are not allowing themselves to accept and hold space for these really formative experiences. So with that seventh house energy, it's really essential that we do hold space for those things so that we don't really cut off parts of our soul, parts of ourself. And then, through holding space for it, we learn and we transmute the experiences to become more. So, okay. Moving on to Chiron in the 8th house. So when you have Chiron in the 8th house, what it can indicate is that traumatic experiences for you are almost like a life and death situation of sorts. Eighth house is ruled by Scorpio, and Scorpio, as well as the eighth house, more specifically, has to do with taboos like sex and death. So the traumatic experiences you go through, likely they'll be very transformative, where it feels like you'll be burned to ashes and you have to rise out of them like a phoenix. There's a sense of rebirth through your wounding and through your healing as well. Also, there might be wounding in regards to those aspects that the eighth house represents. It can be through things like sex, sexual wounding. It can be wounding from losing loved ones dying unexpectedly, and wounding through death, wounding through sex. It can also be wounding through shared resources. You might have inheritance, whether that be financial or even genetic, or any really form of inheritance that you don't feel like you want or need. Perhaps you might inherit debt from certain people in your family that you weren't expecting to inherit. Perhaps you'll inherit actually a lot of money, and that puts you at as a target for either other family members, or there's a dispute of the will, or X, Y, or Z. There's a sense of wounding from inheritance, through sex, through death, through others' resources as well. So with all that said, how do we find healing with that eighth house energy? Holding space, of course. Holding space for our experiences. Allowing ourselves to feel what we feel in regards to whatever traumatic experiences we're going through or we've been through, so that we can transmute them and learn from them. The eighth house being ruled by Scorpio, it is about transfiguration and transmutation of energies. So we're taking in whatever traumatic experiences we've had, and we're learning to bring them to a higher octave so that we can learn from them. Oftentimes exploring taboo subjects like sex and death, being able to form a really deep kind of belief system or system of value around those things, plunging into like occult matters in regards to death and sex, they can give us a foundation that allows us to heal, because oftentimes with Chiron and with the eighth house, it's a sense of being brought down to ground zero. Chiron is like our deepest wounds, and then the eighth house is like death and transformation. So we're starting from, something being burned down, something being wounded, where we're at our core, we're at our nothing, and being able to rebuild from that and find power through transforming nothing into something. Of course, we're never actually nothing. We hold all of these experiences, and that's what we transform them into that foundation and into that strength. So exploring those topics, allowing ourselves to connect with taboos and understand those more so, that can be very healing for eighth house people as well. There's a sense of transformation that's very deep through the eighth house, and overcoming things that can be incredibly traumatic through those topics, especially of sex and death, sexual trauma through death and unexpected death, and being able to transmute those and become something where those experiences don't control our lives. That's so incredibly powerful and inspiring. And that can create a lot of healing for us. And in that healing, we inspire other people to heal in that same way. Moving on to Chiron in the ninth house. When we have Chiron in the ninth house, what it can indicate for us is that there's wounding in regards to religion and spirituality, especially. The ninth house is the house of God. So when we're looking at ninth house matters, ninth house can also be foreign travel and higher education. I get the sense of like a cult-like trauma that results from this placement. So for those of you who like study cults or have interest in cults, there's a sense of like blockage from the outside world, from the outside collective, and being very intentional about just one specific community. The third house is the community that we grow up in. So ninth house opposite that, it's like the communities that we explore outside of our own, the places that we go to learn about new cultures and new ways of like living culturally. And so with Chiron in our ninth house, we have wounding in terms of these topics of exploring new places, of thinking and philosophizing in new ways, and in our relationship with God or our higher power, spirit, whatever we call it, whatever we call our God, yeah. And so we may have religious trauma and religious like baggage that our family has put on us, or we may have grown up in these systems of belief that can be really damaging and that keep us in a limited frame of mind rather than the expansive frame of mind that ninth house, which is ruled by Sagittarius, which is very open-minded, represents. Ninth house is also Jupiter because Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter is all about expansion. So yeah, there's wounding in regards to keeping ourselves small, keeping ourselves untraveled, keeping ourselves from reaching that place of higher education where we open our minds. So how do we heal from that? Of course, holding space for those experiences, but also allowing ourselves to go out and try those things, go out and explore new places. As much triggering that might bring up, it's important that we do it, because otherwise we may not experience those triggers and bring those things to our awareness so we can transmute them. With all of these placements, wherever Chiron is in your chart, you're going to be triggered because it has to do with trauma. So the important thing is to go out and face that thing anyway and have the courage to do so. In doing so, you bring up these things, but you also allow yourself to transmute them. So study new religions, study new ways of spirituality, heal your relationship with God, and look at what it means to connect with God, to connect with your higher power, to connect with spirit. We are all God collectively, and I think we forget that God isn't someone that punishes us. God isn't someone who holds rage and a lack of compassion for us. God is someone who we are, and who you are, and who I am, and is infinitely loving and always will be. Because at our core, that is who we are. Infinitely loving, infinitely compassionate, and recognizing that, opening yourself up to your own concept of God rather than the one that you could have inherited from your family, that can be so powerful and healing. So yeah, allowing yourself to be triggered and trying these things, going to new places, getting educated. A lot of cults don't want you to be educated too, because then you develop critical thinking. So doing these things that trigger you, they can create so much healing, because again, you're starting from that place of like ground zero, being wounded, and you're expanding outward, and it's a miracle. It is truly a miracle to expand from these places, where we're told not to, think for ourselves or to believe God loves us. It's such a powerful and wonderful thing. Yeah, or to believe that, we are God and everyone is God. That's a really revolutionary thing for some people as well. Yeah, so it just depends. But definitely open yourself to new experiences. That'll be incredibly healing for my ninth house Chiron people. All right, moving on to Chiron in the 10th house. All right, so when you have Chiron in the 10th house, what it can indicate is that there's a sense of wounding that comes through career matters, and also your personal reputation and kind of your personal brand. 10th house is the image that we project to the world and how people see us, like kind of in a marketing sense, in a personal brand sense. So if you have Chiron in the 10th, you might be seen by other people as like an incredibly like healing presence to be around. You might be seen as someone that does healing work and that has like an ability to really connect with people and heal people from traumatic experiences. However, with Chiron in the 10th, because the 10th house is ruled by Capricorn, which is ruled by Saturn, it can indicate that it takes a lot of work for us to get to this ideal of being a healer. So we might feel like a sense of imposter syndrome, like we're putting on airs when we're not really that amazing of a healer that people think we are. And so we can feel shame or a sense of wounding that results in that. We might have this idea of being a healer is like or have that archetype of Chiron, being the healer, being like this amazing, like creative being that creates through experiences that can sometimes be traumatic, that can be like wounded in us. That can be a wound in us because we want that. That is our ideal. And like when we don't measure up to that ideal, even in our own mind, or like when people meet us and be like, oh, you're not really like that. Like, what are you doing? Like, you're supposed to be like that. That can be wounding for us. So we might also have been told like by our families that's who we are, and so not living up to that, we might feel ashamed of it. But it takes a lot of work to get to that place and to be that ideal that we strive to be, and that's okay. But yeah, it just takes the work to get there. There's patience involved, and we're not gonna have it like immediately. Having the courage to say, yeah, I'm on my way there, and not be deterred by people telling us that either we should be there already or that we need to be this X, Y, or Z already on our path. That's none of their business. Our path is our path, and we have the power to control it and to walk it as we need to. Yeah. But yeah, with Chiron in the 10th, holding space for those wounds that have to do with career, that have to do with life path and reputation, that can be really healing for us, allowing ourselves to heal through our public image and show perhaps publicly how we're healing, how we're doing things, can be incredibly inspiring, and showing that we're not always our ideal. That could be part of your public image. Chiron is very much the idea of like, the imperfection is where the light shines through in us. So like the crack in the vase is like what allows like the divine light to show through. It's not an imperfection, it's part of what makes it perfect. That's the ideal of Chiron. That's the idea of Chiron. So being able to show our imperfections and our sense of humanity in a public way is really powerful when you have 10th house in Chiron, or Chiron in the 10th. Yeah, and allowing yourself to hold space for, wounding that comes from career failure as well. Sometimes you might feel like a failure in your career when you have Chiron in the 10th. However, you don't fail as long as you learn from the experience. So whenever you feel like there's a loss, if you're able to learn from it, it's not a loss, and it just puts you higher and closer to your ideal, whatever that might be in your career. Yeah. You are so incredibly capable, 10th house Chiron people, and you are capable of healing people through your life path. It's a long journey and it takes work. That being said, as long as you can continue to learn through that work, you have the endurance to do it. Don't lose faith or heart. You definitely got this. All right, moving on to Chiron in the 11th house. So when you have Chiron in the 11th house, what it can indicate for you is that there's a sense of wounding that comes through your networks and the groups that you're a part of. The 11th house is ruled by Aquarius, and Aquarius does have to do with the collective and how we are able to bring our unique energy to help and make the collective like stronger and more progressive, how to help the collective move forward. So with Chiron in the 11th, you might sometimes be seen as an oddball in the groups that you're in, might sometimes be seen as the black sheep. You stand out in a way because of your progressive nature or your uniqueness. You're very aware of how unique you are, and other people are as well. And sometimes this rubs people the wrong way, because in being unique, if we're not familiar enough to the groups we're a part of, they reject us. So there's an importance in learning how to connect with people and how to have compassion for people that aren't quite on the same wavelength that we're at. It might take a bit of time for us to find the group that really resonates with us, that really feels healing and feels like we can be a part of in a way where the connections create healing. Wounding through groups, wounding through a sense of being abandoned by groups, or conversely, perhaps losing ourselves in groups, like feeling like we don't know who we are in groups, and we lose our sense of identity sometimes in groups as a result of Chiron in the 11th. That's what Chiron in the 11th can indicate. So how do we heal from this? Holding space, of course, for our wounds, allowing ourselves enough separation from groups where we can reflect as well as enough time with or around groups where we can be triggered as we need to be, so that it brings to our awareness what our wounding is. Also, really connecting with people that want to heal, groups that want to heal, support groups, 12-step groups, groups of healers more generally, or Facebook groups where, you know, there's people asking questions about, you know, emotional health, emotional well-being, whatever kind of well-being and health group. It's important to connect with people that have a similar desire to heal. And in doing so, there's a sense of equanimity that results, and equality. So there's not a separation or a feeling like some people are above or below. The hierarchy is more equalized that way, and that's really big for Chiron in the 11th house, because they want like almost a utopic group, if you will. But yeah, groups where people feel like they can share openly with each other and connect with each other, and everyone's moving towards this sense of healing. That can be really powerful for Chiron 11th house people. Chiron in the 11th house people might also find that they really resonate and are connected with very healing people. At first it might be people that wound them a lot until they recognize these wounds in this kind of cyclic energy. But yeah, once they do, they can really respond and find a lot of friendship and camaraderie with people in healing professions. They may be in a healing profession themselves. They might start groups that create a lot of healing and support for other people. They're very capable of kind of group therapy, if you will. All right, moving on to Chiron in the 12th house. So when you have Chiron in the 12th house, what it can indicate is that there's a sense of wounding that comes from hidden places, spirituality, and a sense of isolation. 12th house is ruled by Pisces. It has to do with institutions and institutionalizations. It's like places that we might feel isolated from the rest of society or from the world. It's different from like this 11th house isolation from the group, in that 12th house isolation, it's like there's not as much social awareness of being isolated. There's not as much like, it's like you're in a different group with 11th house, but with 12th house, it's like you're in a different reality. And so it can be wounding through institutionalization in terms of going to jail, in terms of going into a mental institution, in terms of going into a rehab facility, etc. There's a sense of undoing of yourself where you lose your sense of reality with the 12th house. It can also be, it's a very spiritual house too, so you might feel psychically attacked sometimes, and when you try to explain that or explain these like spiritual occurrences and disturbances that result, you might be seen as insane. So there's wounding in terms of insanity as well with that 12th house energy. So how do we heal? How do we transmute this? And how do we move up and beyond? Well, it starts by diving deep. With Chiron in the 12th, it's holding space for these kind of oceanic reality shifting experiences that we have, and allowing ourselves almost to be like the ocean floor, where we can hold the ocean in our hands rather than dissolving in the chaos of it. In creating that perspective, it allows us to recognize that we are not these experiences, we are not these emotions that we go through, and in doing so, we become bigger than them. And so we draw them into our experience and allow them to inform who we are without allowing them to dictate who we are. And in doing so, we create a lot more peace, we create a lot more harmony and structure in our lives rather than being caught in chaos. Sometimes when you have Chiron in the 12th, going through that institutionalization, that can be what promotes healing and what inspires other people to heal as well, through sharing those experiences and being able to take ownership of them. That way, not only have we learned from it, but we share our learning, and people can be inspired to realize that their lives aren't over when they're institutionalized. It just creates another layer to them, and it creates more richness if we choose to create and see more richness through the experience. So there's a lot of healing also through solitude. Chiron in the 12th, it's that polarity between isolation and solitude. So we might feel like in isolation we'll go insane. However, allowing ourselves solitude to process our experiences, balancing that with going out and being part of this reality that we collectively take part in. When we are able to find balance between those two, we don't lose a sense of like the richness and infiniteness of reality. We also don't kind of go away from humanity as well, or connecting with others as well. Because when we don't find that balance between solitude with God and branching out to people in this reality, in striking that balance, there's a peace because we recognize God in other people, but we also don't lose track of ourselves and how we experience God through ourselves, because we are God as well. There's a balance that comes between those two polarities, and so we don't go insane and lose track of like why our soul is here, why we came here, and who we are, because we see other people. But then we also don't lose track of our soul and why we're here and who we are by becoming inundated with other people's energies. Chiron in the 12th house is super sensitive as well, so there's that oceanic quality. Holding space for our emotions, it gives us more of that foundation to traverse the world without getting inundated by other people's emotions and energies too. Yeah, so holding space, allowing ourselves the balance between solitude and going out into our world, it creates a sense of balance so that we're not either diluting how we experience reality, nor are we trying to break or escape the collective reality that we participate in, and that it's part of our karma to participate in, so that we can raise it up as well. Yeah. All right. That will do it for today's video. Okay, I'm really excited. I've been trying to make this video for a minute, and I think it's taken me doing my own personal work to be able to talk about trauma without feeling a lot of shame around it. I have Chiron at 29 degrees, and it's really a potent placement in my chart. So there's a lot of shame that can kind of result in me talking about Chironian themes. I think there's a lot of shame surrounding trauma a lot of times as well, and fear. So being able to transmute that and talk about it, it's really healing. If you haven't already, please feel free to like this video and subscribe. I really love this channel and posting on it, and it's wonderful to hear from you guys. So whenever you comment and like my videos, I feel very blessed and grateful. And I am really grateful to share these videos with you guys, period. Yeah, so I love you so deeply, and thank you for tuning in. You are so blessed and loved, and I'll see you all in the next video.